You're listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
I have a great story to share with you, some updates from our friends at Lutheran Heritage Foundation in just a moment. Thanks to Concordia University, Wisconsin for supporting The Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University, Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
Joining us today, the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heisey, Executive Director of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Dr. Heisey, welcome back to The Coffee Hour.
Always good to be with you, Andy and Sarah. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. We always enjoy the opportunity to catch up with you and learn about the stories that where LHF is bringing great Lutheran resources to people around the world. And I understand you have several stories to share with us today. I think last time we talked, we touched base on the case in Finland regarding religious liberty. Do you have an update for us?
Yes, we did talk about that. And actually, no, unfortunately, that hate crime trial has begun as of last week, January 24th, so about a week ago. Finnish Member of Parliament, Dr. Päivi Räsänen, who is also Lutheran, and Bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Mission Diocese of Finland, had to make sure I could get all the ELMDF, Dr. Johanna Pojala, were put on trial. And I did get a little bit of updates from them. Interestingly enough, this is just not Lutherans who are concerned about this. Also, World Magazine interviewed me on this, and Christianity Today has been covering this. So this is of interest for Christians at large because, as many are aware, this is probably the beginning of what we might call hate crime trials for Christians in Europe itself. So what happens here will be watched by many, many people.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any updates on the latest and what's been happening in that case?
Well, as I know, interestingly enough, there have been a lot of good public protests. Just the day before the trial, 120 people attended a protest at the Finnish embassy in Oslo, Norway. Norwegians are very concerned about this case, and Bible colleges in Finland are going to have a follow-up protest on February 14th. So people are getting out on the streets and voicing their opinion. And from what I understood, talking to the cousin of Dr. Pojala, the first day was pretty tough, pretty difficult, because they really came at them and saying, you were disparaging homosexuals in your booklet, which LHF helped them produce. It's called Male and Female, He Created Them. Homosexuality challenges basic biblical concepts of marriage. And they published that back in 2004 when I was on the mission field over in Russia. So interestingly enough, this retroactive hate crime speech charge was filed in 2019. So, in 2004, remember, this is before gay marriage was passed in the United States. It was a different time. And if you know the people, I do not know Dr. Räsänen personally, but I know Johanna. I've stayed at his house several times. I know his family. They're just very wonderful folks. He defies stereotypes many from the left would have of Christians. He's very soft-spoken, quiet, respectful. I've never really heard him raise his voice at all, even to his children. I'm sure it must have happened. With children, it happens, but he really is that kind of gentle, kind soul. And, he's pretty much at peace with a lot of this. He's kind of told me, he said this, that we are just defending traditional Christianity. We're more concerned for what this case will do for Christians at large, whether it will compel them to be quiet. So he said, what happens to us, we're Dr. Räsänen and he are not necessarily overly concerned. If they could potentially serve prison sentences up to 2 years. This, by the way, of course, is a recent mission partner or partner church for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod as of last year. I know President Harrison was over there for the installation of Johanna in Finland back in, I believe it was August of last year. So, this we're all watching this really closely. In fact, the International Lutheran Council financed a trip for Johanna to the States last fall. And he met with several congressmen and also with the Alliance Defending Freedom in Washington, D.C., and then headed over to Fort Wayne and preached at some churches, gave a presentation at the seminary, and concluded his trip in Boston at First Lutheran Church there in Boston before flying back to Finland. All of this, while he's doing all of this, he's telling me we have the Pastoral Companion book ready that we're going to publish in February. So naturally, we're doing Lutheran heritage work, and he is our primary director, for want of a better term, for Finnish publications and translations. So he was telling we were talking about this, and I said, well, I could understand if there's a delay. You do have something else going on, don't you? But all he could do is chuckle a little bit and say, no, we'll get it out in February. So really, really remarkable man, and just really sad what's happening and what this tells us about our world today. But I think of Matthew 10:18. I was just rereading that with, you will stand before governors and kings and you will give an account for me. And don't prepare what you will, do not be anxious, do not prepare your words in advance. And that sounds kind of like the advice they're following, biblical advice. Just preach the truth and preach it in gentleness and respect, but firmly. And that's what they do. So really encourage everyone to pray very hard for our Finnish Lutheran friends, because what came to them can come to all of us in the near future. One never knows.
Certainly lifting them up in prayer. And I imagine this just must be a trying time for not just for them, but for the members of their churches as well. That to see this happening to their pastor, their bishop as well.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, for anything else, any other updates from Finland that you want to share with us before we move to other parts of the world?
No, I think that's pretty much covers what was going on there.
All right, let's move to Asia. What resources and opportunities has LHF had to partner with others and share faithful resources, especially the Lutheran confessions in Asia?
Yeah, interestingly enough, we just never get enough children's Bible storybooks into Vietnam. We just printed some more, and again, they're running out. Vietnam's very interesting. We actually understood that there are charter schools that are asking for our children's Bible storybooks as well. So imagine that in Vietnam. But more recently, we have been working diligently on the Book of Concord in what we call traditional Chinese, and that's a type of Chinese spoken in Taiwan and Hong Kong, and also in Indonesian and in Vietnamese itself. So, here we have something that others might see as a kind of egghead theologian book, the Book of Concord, and yet we have a lot of new pastors and teachers in the church who really don't know as much about Lutheranism and its origins and what it stands for, and what learning we can get from the Book of Concord in that regard. So these are really important publications. The traditional Chinese now looks like it's getting ready to be printed, and Indonesians going through some final work, as well as Vietnamese. So these are all really just about ready to go to the printer. And at least from my perspective, I don't know if I can't recall if I shared with you last year, I taught an online course at Grand Canyon University out in Phoenix, and they have developed a program, a master's program for aspiring theologians in the Lutheran confessional churches out in Southeast Asia, including one of them was our director of LHF in Cambodia, Pastor Sopakorn. So this was an opportunity for me to be able to share with them some of the knowledge that I received in as a student at Concordia Seminary in St. Louis, and they're very eagerly soaking everything up, and it's just a thrill to do that, and then to start getting publications like a Book of Concord in the languages of people in Asia. I think it's just very, very important.
That sounds like very exciting work. The Book of Concord is so important for teaching Lutheran doctrine. I'm curious, how was Lutheran doctrine being taught prior, or how is it being taught now, I suppose, prior to these books actually being published?
Well, you'll probably, it depends, I guess, on where you are. There really aren't, there are a few seminaries I know that we work through, certainly in Taiwan, and I believe we worked with one in Hong Kong. By we, I'm speaking Missouri Synod. But on the whole, a good example maybe is Indonesia. You have what you call Protestant churches, which were founded back in the 19th century by a Lutheran missionary, Ludwig Nommensen. And of course, they kind of became, like so many, through the influence of more liberal teaching in Europe, quote unquote Protestant churches, as opposed to Lutheran confessional churches. So documents like this just kind of fell by the wayside, not to mention a basic catechism. But what we're finding, especially interesting in Indonesia, people are really in these Bible colleges are very interested in getting the Book of Concord in their own language. So this is kind of thrilling for us to be able to fill a need and also then promote good, solid Lutheran doctrinal teaching.
What has been the response of those who have received the Book of Concord in their own language recently?
Well, those who are getting it now are just thrilled. We're hearing from them that they can't wait to get into it, and like I say, then through opportunities like the Grand Canyon teaching opportunity, we get a chance to teach them as well as our missionaries over there. I'm not sure if you're aware that this is probably, I guess, with Liberty University there in Virginia, the largest. Those two are the largest evangelical colleges or universities in America. And Grand Canyon is run by President Brian Mueller, who's a LCMS member. And of course, my old Hebrew professor, Paul Rabi, is actually there now in retirement. He's emeritus, but he does some teaching. And so the Gruna Foundation, through Pastor Jeff Ehlers out in Phoenix there, worked with them to develop a program for aspiring theologians in Southeast Asia so they could get actually Lutheran doctrinal teaching. And so they've been using, Dr. Kolb taught a course, one of our former professors, Jeffrey Kloha, others, Doug Rutt, who's the provost at Concordia Seminary, have also taught courses through this class. So the more we can get books like this, as I talk to them, they're really excited, especially the Cambodians, waiting for them to get a Book of Concord in Khmer, because they've already got the first version now, and they've got a second. Book of Concord sometimes becomes so big in a language you have to do volume 1 and volume 2. And so our director was just thrilled to get that out last year and to be able to really start reading some of the things that we could share with them, but we had to use English copies. Now they have it in their own language.
Thanks be to God. We are getting an update from Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise, Executive Director of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, on the Lord's work around the globe through the Lutheran Heritage Foundation. We'll continue the conversation right here on the Coffee Hour in just a moment. I'm Eddie Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
At Concordia University, Wisconsin, we believe you were created for a reason: to use your God-given gifts to help others, to live a life of self-sacrifice in a me-first world, to live a life that's uncommon. Whether you're taking one of 50-plus online programs or learning with us in person on the shores of Lake Michigan, you'll be equipped to make an uncommon impact. Learn more at cuw.edu. Concordia University, Wisconsin. Live uncommon.
Welcome back to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
Today we're talking with the Reverend Dr. Matthew Heise, Executive Director of the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, getting an update on the Lord's work around the globe through the work of Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Wonderful updates on what's going on around the globe. Thank you for the news from Finland and what's happening in Asia. Now, Pastor, what about theological education? We've talked about resources. Let's talk a little bit more about theological education, what's happening with that, and international partners.
Okay, so we've gone from Europe to Asia. Now we'll move over to Africa. There is probably a church that we believe will become a partner church of the LCMS at the convention. We're hopeful, at least for next year. The Evangelical Lutheran Church of South Sudan and Sudan, and it is directed by Bishop Peter Anabati, who is a PhD student in missiology at Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne. And Peter has done a wonderful job. This church was founded about 28 years ago by the late Pastor Andrew Elisa, who left the Anglican Church because of more liberal teaching. And interestingly enough, then our founder Robert Rahn connected with him and sent him copies of the Book of Concord, Luther's Small Catechism. The more he read this, he said, "I think I'm Lutheran," and we hear this so often from people who, as they begin to read, especially the classic documents of the Lutheran confessions. So in 28 years now, there are 85 pastors, 200 congregations, and roughly 150,000 members in South Sudan, this Evangelical Lutheran Church of South Sudan and Sudan. You kind of put a slash through there because Sudan is still predominantly Muslim, and we have experienced a couple of Lutheran churches being bulldozed not more than 4 years ago in Khartoum, in the capital. But there is a little bit more religious freedom in South Sudan. And so we're working in about 7 of 64 languages in what is still, I believe, the youngest country in the world. It was separated from Sudan in 2012. So you have a church that's fairly young, it's growing, and naturally needs pastors. And so our founder, Pastor Ron, actually started a seminary up there then in the late 90s. And a class, he just turned 86, by the way, and made his last visit to, what he claims is his last visit to South Sudan for graduation. And along with our volunteer pastor, Reverend Dr. Bernie Lutz, who's a sprightly 88. So these two guys put me to shame. They went to Africa and helped celebrate the graduation of a class. They go through 4 years, by the way. And there were 20 graduates, 17 were ordained, 3 have not yet finished their requirements for ordination. And a new class is now just starting up this month with 25. So we're always looking, usually getting pastors from the United States, from the LCMS, as well as professors from Concordia Theological Seminary in Fort Wayne and in St. Louis. We've had Will Schumacher, one of my old good friends from St. Louis, as well as Detlef Schultz from Fort Wayne, teaching courses there. So we've also developed a component where people can do this online as well, trying to hook up South Sudan to the internet, at least at the church compound there. So this is all now being run by our Reverend Dr. Dinku Bato, who manages our work among the African diaspora here in the States, as well as in Africa. And Dinku does phenomenal job with church relations and doing this work. And, we're grateful for Shawan Trump, the regional director for East Africa. Now the Office of International Mission of the LCMS is assisting us financially with some of the costs of that seminary. So once again, it's really some of the partnerships we love to develop with the LCMS and their mission arm.
What does the seminary like this mean for such a small, burgeoning church body to be able to work with them and to develop and form these pastors? What does that mean for that church body?
Well, I mean, it's essential because when you get out to there are so many congregations scattered throughout the countryside. In fact, one of their requests is they said, we need to have churches and not just meeting under trees. I mean, that's what the seminary did before they built a seminary classroom, because, we'd have pictures of them out there with the instructors and meeting under the trees, literally. We've got good friends of ours up in Bay City, Pastor Robert Roberts and his wife Eileen do just fantastic work, and they're preparing to go back over to in February to South Sudan. But I have a great picture of them sweating out there in the heat under the trees. So people, especially the further they get away from Yambio, which is where the center of the church is, it's not too far from the border of Uganda, and the congregations there are kind of really don't have as much presence. So Peter Anabati, the bishop, tries to get out there, tries to get a motorbike out there or people to do that if they can, because so often congregations are scattered, and so they need to have worker priests. Sometimes they need to have a plot of land where they can farm as well as serve as a pastor. So that's kind of the way the church looks. In many ways, they're tent makers, just like the Apostle Paul was back in biblical times.
What does it mean to a church like this, the Lutheran Church of South Sudan, to have new pastors, to be able to raise up pastors and train pastors so that they can serve in local congregations in their own culture, in their own language?
Yeah, what you see is that you see the church grow, and that's the remarkable thing, because as they are fed spiritually, the churches begin to grow. People begin to recognize, because a lot of times, you have Anglicanism there. You might have a concept of evangelical Christianity, but when we get in there and teach, and when we're able to provide resources in the local language, for example, Acholi is one of those languages, or Nuer or Dinka. These are remarkable opportunities to work with people. So they can get books in their own language. They can then begin to find places to worship. They can gather folks together, and they have a pastor who has now actually undergone seminary training from many of our LCMS pastors, who can give them at least a picture of how you work with a congregation. So of course, they're novices at it, but as they work together as a church, this is more than what the people have. I think of Jesus saying the people look lost without a shepherd, and now they're getting a shepherd. And so at least 17 congregations now will have a new shepherd. And of course, many of these pastors don't serve just one, they'll serve several congregations.
Mm-hmm. Thanks be to God for those pastors who will be able to serve the people. We have one more region to cover, and this is a very exciting one for me. I've seen posts about this on Facebook. The new Spanish hymnal. Can you tell us about this?
Okay, well, we might as well literally just go around the entire globe and end up in South America, Central or North America. Actually, this began well before I joined Lutheran Heritage 7 years ago. One of my fellow missionaries overseas, Ted Cray, who I always say they sent the smarter one to the south, to Venezuela, and the other guy they sent to Russia, to the frozen tundras. But Ted, I've known Ted since we both were posted overseas in 2001. And he is now the regional director for Latin America. And so Ted connected with me and said, hey, we really need some help getting this Spanish hymnal. Can you help support us in the process? And our Ted Nothalong has just, he manages our work in Southeast Asia, and he's right in your area there in St. Charles, Missouri. Ted has done remarkable work with printing, since we print so much of many of our resources in Bangkok, Thailand. And Ted, of course, is originally from Thailand. So this Spanish hymnal is actually being printed in Bangkok, and as we speak, should be getting ready to board a frigate to Brazil, as we will also have one sent to the United States. So we're going to have like 3,160 copies coming to the U.S. And maybe 16,000 copies going to South America to be distributed among Lutheran congregations in Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. And we're really grateful to Pastor Bob Segura of the Office of National Mission, because he is now partnering with us and helping support some of that shipping. So once again, it's just a great opportunity for us to work with our church, be it Office of International Mission or Office of National Mission. And this Spanish hymnal is over 1,000 pages. I mean, I've seen the copies. They're just huge. They really got to get the binding right, and they did. And so there's hopes that this will be considered kind of the LSB for Spanish speakers, especially among mission congregations here in the States. And perhaps at the 2023 LCMS convention, there'll be a formal presentation. So we're really excited. This has been a long time coming to get this printed and getting it out now.
Certainly something to celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Well, it's very clear that you love the work that the Lord has given you to do. I mean, anyone who can recite the specific numbers of shipments going to specific continents knows all about the work that the Lord has given you.
I had them written down.
Thank you so much, Dr. Heisey, for all these updates on the Lord's work through the Lutheran Heritage Foundation, bringing these wonderful resources to so many people in their languages around the world. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you today.
As always, thanks so much, Andy and Sarah.
You've been listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.